And well, here we are with the first news topic of the week. And the good news is it is literally hot news. It's just in. For some reason, we weren't supplied with review code for the Batman Arkham trilogy on Nintendo Switch. But the game did unlock mere hours ago. I've been playing it, or specifically playing Batman Arkham Knight. Oliver's going to be handling the full analysis. And, possibly, even though we've literally just downloaded the game, we're late to the party here because it seemingly other people did get it, and it's not great. There's a lot to go through here, obviously, with 3 different games, but we're just going to be taking a look at Arkham Knight here, which is, the most challenging game for them to have tackled for a conversion to the Nintendo Switch. John, you've been looking, I've played it, but you've been looking at various assets online, and I'm kind of curious before I share my hands-on experience. What do you think?
You've benched it. I've just been checking out what everybody else is posting, and I can't wait to try it myself because I was as soon as I watched the footage, my first thought was, man, there's the Splinter Cell double agent on PS3, there's Shadow of Mordor on PS3, and now there's Arkham Knight on Switch. And I was thinking, like, maybe we should have a showdown between those 3 games. That's the tier I'm talking about here. When I look at what
the trash tier.
It's so, to be upfront, when I look at this, yeah, I feel bad for any consumers that buy it, sure. But I also feel exceptionally bad for any of the developers that had to work on this because they were asked to do something that I would say the Switch and the way this game was built, they were not designed to be compatible. This is Unreal Engine 3 being pushed really hard. There's not a lot of Unreal Engine 3 games on the Switch, and the Switch is newer than Unreal Engine 3, but because of that, I don't think that there was ever really great support for it, like within that framework.
No, I don't think
right?
so. I think there was much surprise when Rocket League was ported to Switch because, Epic wasn't supporting the engine on Switch.
Right. Mm-hmm. So without that support and the fact that it's basically old legacy technology that you're trying to run on this thing, and Arkham Knight is a game that was pushing the limits of it and is kind of outspecced. It outspecs the Switch. It's just a nightmare combination, and I'm kind of amazed they got it running at all, but what they've delivered is not what I would consider
at all
acceptable in terms of, like, as a product you would sell. Very low frame rate. They've turned back the details so far that it makes the PC version at launch look like a masterpiece. I mean, is there texture? Yes. Well, it's like maybe kind of
smooth, very smooth. I'd describe it as.
All the post effects are like pretty much gone. Everything is choppy and ugly and low res and slow and just. I think it's fascinating that this exists at all, but it definitely feels like a game that shouldn't have existed on this hardware. And I feel like the better call would have been, what if they just did Arkham Origins instead of Knight?
Why not?
And just say look, Knight is too much for the Switch. It is clearly. So that's a little bit baffling. But Rich, you actually have proper hands-on, and you've done frame rate analysis. So can we get some real numbers here?
Yeah, well, I'm going to leave a lot of this to Oliver, who's... Actually, before we go into this, I want to share an Oliver anecdote, which was yesterday he came to me and said, you don't need to buy the Arkham trilogy on Switch because I'd like it for personal use, so I'm going to be buying it anyway. And then the footage on Twitter started to emerge, and he got back to me and said, actually, I don't want to buy it anymore. And I said, don't worry, I will. You can access it on my account. But yes, that is kind of like they literally lost a sale there. But anyway, let's talk about the game. Obviously, the thing about Arkham Knight is it starts with pre-rendered video sequences from within the Unreal Engine, right? So those are there, and you're thinking, okay, well, this looks like Arkham Knight, but obviously it's lulling you into a false sense of security. I think that where things started to go wrong is when you actually get into the diner at the beginning, the prologue system where you're sort of role-playing as a policeman. Mm-hmm. And, well, first of all, the texture work on the waitress is It looks like she's got some sort of skin disease.
Oh gosh.
It's not good. It's really not good. And then the camera sort of pans away to the concerned citizen who's pointing out that some guy in the corner is smoking. And the frame rate just drops to 24 frames per second or thereabouts for some reason. And then it just all kicks off. You get you get that sequence which is real time at the beginning where you're panning across the city from the Penguin and then across to Batman. Kind of holds up but is dropping frames. And then it's kind of borderline playable, but obviously it was always going to be about the Batmobile section, right? Because go back to the origins, if you will, of Arkham Knight. And that was always what was causing the console's problems, right? Because the CPU seemingly was taxed too hard. And with all of that streaming that was going on at that speed, it was just too much for it. So it was dropping frames on a PS4, right?
Wait, was it?
Yeah, it is.
I remember it being almost completely locked.
Maybe they improved it, but at launch there were certainly tearing issues and whatnot around the Batmobile sections.
Interesting.
And and basically what's happening now is just like a complete sort of system surrender. The Switch officially sort of raises the white flag and says no more. And it sort of wavers between sort of 20 to 30. But I think what was amusing me is that, well, basically it verges on the unplayable, right? And obviously because of that, you're careening into the sides of the environments. Then the collision physics kick in, which is an extra burden on the CPU. And then you're basically, I think the lowest I logged was 16 frames per second. But this is just like standard gameplay. It's not as if I've manufactured any scenario to actually tank the frame rate. And that's just from like the first 15 minutes of play. It's a write-off, basically. Not had time to look at the other games, but people are seemingly ambivalent about it or unimpressed. And the thing to bear in mind is those are Xbox 360 games, right?
Right.
The Switch should be able to do that without too much of an effort.
Again, though, Unreal Engine 3 and just who knows what.
I mean, they weren't perfect. I mean, a lot of if you go back in time, they still weren't perfect back on those PS360 consoles necessarily. Nope. But I think here, one thing from the footage that I see is that when the frame rate gets low enough, it seems to mess up the animation cadence as well too. So like, it's not just like the frame rate dropping, but it's also like the position of the car as you're driving it also doesn't seem to like line up with where it should be, given like the amount of time that has passed between like the amount of frames that have occurred. So it seems like the game, when it hits some sort of performance level, it doesn't seem to run perfectly, like just animation wise, which is also a big issue. I feel like this should, like John said, just should not be released. There's no way this should be considered playable. It wasn't playable at launch on PC back then, and it was way better than this. Like this is
sure. You could get it to work if you basically locked to 30.
If you locked to 30, but obviously PC standards are much higher and different. Here, even for the Switch, which we've seen big problems with games, but like not like this.
You're quite right. The correct call would have been to do Origins.
Yeah. And that game is much more manageable. It's also one that ran on the previous generation of consoles. People don't like it for some reason. I think it's completely fine. It's a completely fine game.
I think it was just when it came out, it felt like an unneeded sequel, but it's actually good. It's
fine.
If
you go back to it now,
there was blowback that Rocksteady didn't do it as well.
Right, I think that's what it was.
I don't
unfair.
That. That's all unfair. I think it's a completely fine game. But yeah, here I just kind of like the PC version back then. I just say stay away at least from this game. I can't say anything about the others.
We got to talk about. Obviously, you guys are. Once you've seen Avatar, you're going to sit down and do your graphics of the year.
Yeah.
May I put forth the bat signal for texture of the year?
Oh no!
Yeah, put it right next to some brilliant Avatar texture or Alan Wake 2 texture, and this thing This bat signal, I tell you that.
God, the thing I love about this footage though is like, there's that part at the beginning where he's like, "Where are you going?" And he's like, "Even in the odds," and dives with the building and calls the Batmobile, and it's just
so
like,
cool.
as soon as Batman hits the button to even the odds, the frame rate's like 16 frames per second. It just, it's like, whoa.
It's just, sorry, I sent you that screenshot of the bat signal sort of dominating the view, and it's this massive low resolution texture, and it's just like amazing.
It looks like you're waiting for it to load in, but it never does.
So it's so interesting though that textures are so crunched because, if you think about it, this game could run on things like a GTX 670 and a 680 too, like 2 gigabyte frame buffer there. You would think the Switch.
Wait, how does it run on those?
It does.
It does. I mean, there's a lot of swapping that happens.
Yeah.
Certainly it did at launch, but, lower the frame rate to 30 and, 750 Ti was doing PS4 level graphics at launch.
Yeah, so that's the thing that's interesting. Like, you wouldn't expect necessarily that they would have to crunch the texture so much, but maybe because the streaming is so intense, they need as small object files as possible, so... Yeah, wow. I'm actually curious about some of the other sections of the game, like any of the sneaking sections, like how they play out. There's a lot of stuff I'm curious about.
Interior sections might be slightly
They should be
better. All right. Well, I wouldn't say all right, but they could be better.
It could be better. But that's not the full game. The game has a lot of driving around or just even flying around the city, Oof, Batman.
So I'm really going to be interested in Oliver's review because he's done all of the prep work already, the other versions, etc. He was really excited about this one going in. And, the narrative has changed. I'm going to be fascinated to see just how much has been cut back. I mean, the lighting looks weird. The originals didn't have particularly great anti-aliasing.
No, it was like FXAA era.
Yeah. So, the amount of cutbacks and the poor performance, all bets are off.
Man, when they zoomed in on the Batmobile in the original version, I remember thinking it just looked unbelievable at the time. It was like, this looks like a polygon
cutbacks.
Right? Yeah, and then you see it on Switch, and it's just like, oh, it's not just it's polygon textures, like it's completely ruined. Like all the visual effects and the finely crafted like look of this game is just gone. And things like, I know people complain about motion blur, but I feel like in this game it was an absolute must. It made the Batmobile sections look unbelievable in motion. Mm-hmm. And when you get rid of that, add in the worst graphics and the super choppy frame rate, it looks barely functional. Mm-hmm. Like this is
the
not
frame times
a product.
Are so high.
It should not have been sold. I think this is probably one of the worst things I've seen on a recent console in a very long time. Like, this has no business being on Switch.
It's like
it is shocking.
It reminds me a bit of like Outer Worlds original version before they patched it up. Like John, like you remember
there
that.
are issues there for sure.
Oh,
but,
right.
Yeah, but I think the performance was even better there, though. Honestly.
Yeah, I think the performance was less bad here.
Yeah.
What's interesting though is that this isn't the only WB game to use UE3 on the Switch. Obviously, MK11 was also based on their version of Unreal Engine 3, right? Like NetherRealm. But that's a much smaller scale game because it's a fighting game. But there was still a lot of visual cutbacks and things like the crypt, I guess, or whatever. Had like intense fog, super low resolution, and it ran badly. That was fine. I think that version was at least playable and reasonable enough, where this is just like,
you know what they should have done, John? They should have done clip.
Looking at your footage,
they should have done clip plane fog and have it like just like a callback to an N64 game. They should just it only renders like 20 meters in front of you. It's atmospheric.
I don't know. Would that even really help though?
I doubt it.
I feel like I bet it wouldn't. Not with the way modern games work. I just don't think that would make a difference. Maybe it would even the odds. I don't know.
Even the odds. Okay. I guess we're just going to have to wait for Oliver's analysis for the final definitive word on this this port. But it's. I mean, well, what could I say? This footage speaks for itself. I think we should just,
we're just beating up on this
topic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really disappointing. Really disappointing, but ultimately kind of expected, right?
Yeah, I expected this coming into it. Yeah.
Yeah.